Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the demon prince of Konoha and got Harem? Part 2. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. What was going through your mind? You're angry? You bet I'm angry. That doesn't mean you have to shout at me. It had been like this since they'd reached Naruto's den. The young auburn-furred kid, Nichi, watched the words bounce back and forth between the two with a mixture of amusement and growing apprehension. Nichi's self-proclaimed big brother had a temper, and the wheat-haired human had no idea just how scary her Oni-sama could be when set off. He was rapidly nearing that point. Infuriating man. Stubborn woman. I'm not some pathetic little damsel that needs protecting, you know. That's not the point, Temari. What then? I'm a ninja, a kunoichi. I can take care of myself in a fight. Naruto grabbed her by the shoulders, forcing himself not to shake her like a doll. That was not a simple fight between ninja. Mercenaries. Thugs. It's a conflict between Jinchuriki. It's completely different. How? How is it different? She demanded. It's different because it is a fight between demons. She bit back her tongue at that, which was what Naruto had been aiming for. She continued to glare stubbornly at him. You're hurting my shoulders. He let go abruptly, muttering a soft apology under his breath. Turning away, he shuffled through the various holes in the cavern wall for bandages, eventually pulling forth a small roll of cloth, not unlike ninja tape. Give me your arms, he requested sternly. Temari did so with little reluctance, the sand-crusted gashes on her forearms causing her to wince. Naruto brought her hands to his face and proceeded to lick one of the wounds on her arm. The hell? Temari exclaimed, pulling her arms back abruptly. What are you doing? Naruto stared back at her with hard eyes, still holding onto one wrist. Cleaning your wounds. With your mouth. His brows furrowed his puzzlement. He didn't understand, she realized. He wasn't raised as a human, why should he think like one? Foxes, like most other animals, use their tongues to bathe and clean wounds. To the demon prince, there was nothing strange or unsanitary about it. Her lips pressed together and, eyes averted, she gave him back access to her arms, blood blossoming on the apples of her cheeks as she felt his tongue scrape across her skin. It was wet and bizarre, but he was succeeding in getting out the little sand grains embedded in her raw flesh, the blood crusting in all the wrong places for a clean heal. The points of his canines inevitably brushed across her skin, causing her to shiver. She wasn't sure if it was from fear. Naruto felt her shiver and glanced up at her face. The back of his neck warmed. Ignoring the strange sensation, he focused his attentions on the woman's wounds until he was satisfied that they were clean enough. Fresh blood welled in the gashes, and he quickly wrapped the gauze around Temari's arms until blood no longer leaked through, cutting the cloth with the sharp edges of his canines. His mouth tasted of iron. Temari glanced toward the cavern entrance. To tell you the truth, it would be a bad idea for me to go back to the village for a day or so. Gaara is very upset and that isn't likely to change for a while. However, I don't want to leave Kankuro to take the heat for me. She glanced at the other blonde. Care to put in any ideas? The demonic man adopted a thoughtful expression. Nichi trotted up to his side, yipping as she placed her paws on his shin. What is it, Imato? The tunnels, Oni-sama. The tunnels. His face lit up with a grin. That's a great idea, little sis. He said, picking her up. Nichi let loose a rare purr. Temari, however, couldn't understand the small fox's barks and coughs. What's a good idea? Naruto only smiled knowingly. You'll see. You're shitting me. I assure you, I am not, as you so delicately put it, shitting you. She bent her knees, gazing into black cavern with wary eyes. I don't like dark spaces. It was true. Despite the black scorpion's base being underground, it had not instilled within her a resistance to claustrophobia. Her youngest brother had brought upon her a dislike of the dark, and the years had taught her that narrow, dark places only led to dangerous situations, ambushes being among the most common. I assure you that the tunnels are quite safe. They were created during the Shodaime Hokage's reign, the demon prince explained, as evacuation routes during invasion. True, they have been forgotten and as such have fallen into great disrepair, but the roots that hold the walls are sturdy. So, no one knows these are even here anymore? She asked, noting the drape-like vines hanging over the hillside opening like ooze. That's not entirely true. Anbu occasionally frequent the tunnels to get from one place to another more quickly and inconspicuously, but it's not always efficient, so those times are generally few and far between. She glanced over at the other blonde. Running into one of them is going to spell trouble for me, isn't it? He laughed and shook his head. Not as such. There's no law or rule to keep people from using the tunnels. Though I'm sure anyone you come across would be surprised by your presence. I get how this is going to keep me off my brother's radar until he calms down, but I don't really see how it helps. He merely smiled at her before exhaling into his hands. "It's an ebi," he whispered, causing a pale blue flame to burst into life in one hand. "Come, I'll show you." He looked up. "You're going to have to get off my head now, Nichi-chan." The little red fox barked and leapt off her master's scalp as he ducked his head to enter the tunnel network. The foxfire cast a haunting blue glow on the walls of the tunnel, shadows growing and flickering like the ghosts of children playing hide and seek tag. It was vastly different from the warm golden glow normal fire cast, and Temari felt her inside squirm. She wasn't a superstitious person by nature, but the number of people she had witnessed the death of by Gaara's hand had always left her with a lingering unease at the thought of dead spirits. She knew that he was already aware of where she was staying thanks to his little grey spy, but nonetheless appreciated it when he asked for the sector of the village and street name. The air was sweet with the smell of rot, and several of the roots dripped water on her head. "I knew I'd find you here." It reminded her very much too much of a more familiar cavern hundreds of miles away from where she was now. The halls were the oldest part of the burrow, constructed sometime during the Nidaime Kazekage's reign. It consisted of a number of run-down, apartment-like constructs that had fallen into disrepair once an Anbu base was built on the surface above the area. That was not to say that it wasn't inhabited anymore. It had gone from a shining pinnacle of black market power to a slum. Those that lived in the halls were newbies and others who sat at the bottom of the gang hierarchy, with no connections to the people that lived above ground, people who wouldn't make noise. Temari glanced up at the dark ceiling of the cavern as she walked into it. Unlike most of the burrow, the top of the rock formation could be seen here and was littered with shards of broken glass, stray coins, and other glittering objects that made the ceiling appear as if it were covered with oversized stars. Temari herself had never stayed in the halls. Her position as the daughter of the Kazekage and official ninja of Sunagakure kept her high in the chain, even at the beginning. If someone rubbed her the wrong way, she could immediately turn him or her into the officials above ground, and everybody knew it. It was Sakata who caught a glint of reddish-brown hair on the cavern wall. "Miss Yuzu." The girl looked down from her perch, her large brown eyes widening at the sight of the golden-haired heiress and her companion. "Dima-chan," she murmured, dropping down to the ground and walking up to the other female. "I knew I'd find you around here. I knew. After a moment of hesitation, Temari leaned down and embraced her old friend. "Gods, Miss Yuzu, what are you doing, coming to a place like this? This isn't like you. Not at all." I didn't have anywhere else to go." Temari pulled away, placing her hands on the smaller girl's shoulders. Miss Yuzu's large brown eyes were glazed with tears that seemed to glow orange in the dull lamplight. A dark purple bruise stained her cheek. Despite their deep friendship, Temari and Miss Yuzu were almost nothing alike. While Temari was the shinobi daughter of the Kazekage, Miss Yuzu was a typical middle-class civilian girl with divorced parents and a mother who ran a bakery on the other side of town. Temari wore battle kimonos, Miss Yuzu wore shorts. Temari enjoyed fighting, and Miss Yuzu hated the very idea of it. The only things the girls truly agreed on were the joys of botany and the thick-headedness of boys. "What happened?" Temari asked firmly. Miss Yuzu sobbed, stuttering like a child with a speech disorder. "It's stepfather, I couldn't do it anymore, I wouldn't." Sakata growled. "What did that bastard do? Did he touch you, Miss Yuzu?" The girl's silence was answer enough. "Fuck," he shouted, violently kicking over a garbage bin. "That Sanuvabitch." "Tsui-kun," Miss Yuzu murmured, "please. It's my fault. If I wasn't there, mother. Temari silenced her friend with a sharp look. "Not another word. Who told you that bullshit?" Miss Yuzu was too upset to answer. An explosion shuddered through the burrow, quickly followed by screams. The soft golden tail pulled Temari out of her thoughts by wrapping around her wrist. Nichi yipped and Naruto's eyes were filled with concern. "Temari, I think I hit my head." The demon prince was halfway down a fork in the tunnels while she was staring blankly down the other path. "You don't want to go down that way, Temari. That leads to the sewers." He wrinkled her nose. "Yeah, sorry Naruto." If she was surprised that he didn't relinquish his hold on her once she was by his side again, she didn't show it. His face lit up with a smile. "You know that's the first time you've called me by my name since you first asked for it." She blinked at him and slowly grinned back. "Wrong. It's the second." They walked for a while more, the tunnels twisting and forking off like bloody arteries. Naruto finally brought them to a stop under a rain drainage grate, stomping out the flame in his hand by making a fist. Early sunlight filtered in from between the bars across his face as he reached up to push the grill aside. Smiling at her, he bent his knees and fisted his hands together. "Well, up you go, Temari." "You're not coming?" she asked, surprised. He shook his golden-haired head. "A shinobi village is no place for a person like me. If you ever need a quick getaway, don't hesitate to use these passageways. Any Anbu that have a problem with it, direct them to me." She smirked, placing her hands on his shoulders. "Will do, Naruto. Placing one foot solidly on his fisted hands, he heaved her upward and out of the passageway into the awakening village above. Temari landed gracefully, half knelt against the cobblestone alleyway, and glanced back down. "I almost forgot one thing," she said, reaching into her kimono before extending her arm down to the demon prince, "your flower." His strange blue eyes stared at the blossom for a moment before rising to settle on her face. "Temari, I have a question." She chuckled. "If I answer, will I get to leave?" "Yes." She froze in shock, expression growing serious as she stared down at him. "What is it?" she said quietly. "Will you be my friend?" She blinked, silent for several moments. That's your question. You don't want to know the details of the invasion. Soon as structural layout. Who's invading? Nothing. It's not nothing. He protested. Temari frowned, extending the flower further. "Go on, take the flower." "You keep it," he insisted. "Just answer." "Baka," she muttered back, retracting her arm. She slid the grate back over the opening, sealing it. "Hey. I'll see you later tonight, Naruto." She vanished from his sight then, footsteps echoing down to his ears. He could hear morning birds chirping to the rising sun long after she was out of his range of hearing. Nichi brushed against his leg. "Silly, Ani-sama, asking questions you already know the answer to." "Boy, Temari. What happened to your arms?" The pony-tailed woman looked up from the dishes she was cleaning. She was having a difficult time keeping the suds below her wrists. Kankuro was eyeing her expectantly. "Training accident," she replied simply. His gaze remained fairly suspicious. "Hell of an accident." She shrugged. "It's my own fault. Don't worry, they'll be healed up in time for this weekend." It was true, despite the fact that they should have been healing much slower than they were. She wondered if Naruto's method of cleaning the wounds had something to do with it. Kankuro grunted. "Good. I wouldn't want to have to fight for two people." It was phrased like an insult, yet Temari's heart warmed. No one in their family was much good at voicing their affection, but they nonetheless had their ways. She opened her mouth for a snappy comeback, but stopped short at the sound of a door sliding open. Her instincts immediately went on the defensive, afraid that it was her youngest sibling, but her fears were unfounded. It was Baki. The older man's eyes immediately sucked the two siblings out, his face was grim. "Do either of you know what is going on with Gaara? He's very agitated. I'm concerned he may put the mission in jeopardy." Kankuro stood at attention. "Gaara? I have no idea. I haven't seen him since yesterday morning." Temari's soapy hands delicately touched the bandages covering her arms. Her movement did not go unnoticed. Kankuro whirled on her. "I knew it. Training accident, my ass. Temari, what did you do?" "Don't spit at me, you brat," she snapped. "It's none of your business." "On the contrary," Baki interrupted, "it is very much our business. I will not let some hissy fit jeopardize our mission, Temari." She ground her teeth together. She had been hoping to avoid confrontation. "I'll take care of it, then." "Temari," the man growled. She threw her hands in the air. "I said that I'll take care of it. I will. I'll talk to Gaara and get him to cool down. I swear." Baki's eye was hard. "You'd better." "Liar," Gaara muttered, listening to his teammates' conversation through a window. "Training accident, indeed. Liar. You can't trust a word that comes out of her mouth, Gaara." "You're right, mother. Not one word." He watched as she set out to find him with no small amount of reluctance, unaware that he sat hunched on the roof just above her head. Gaara couldn't say he was eager to confront her either. Unless such a confrontation had the possible outcome of her becoming a mass of bloody meat, which he knew was not currently a practical option. Mouth set in a spiteful smirk, he let a margin of sand lead his sister on a wild goose chase across the village. However, with a severe lack of blood spouting from the source of his entertainment, it didn't take long before he grew bored and allowed her sweaty, irritated form come back to very place she'd started. Her eyebrow twitched as Temari resisted the desire to glare at him. He'd killed men for less. "You're in a right foul mood, and I'm not going to ask or try to understand why," she began, "but we need you to keep your temper in check for just a while longer, Gaara. Don't tell me what to do." She frowned then, taking a step toward him. "I can tell you whatever I want, you know as well as anyone that you don't have to do any of it. Not that you ever have." He glanced over at her. "You're not stupid enough to go after him before the weekend, so don't let your superiority complex make you do anything stupid. We've risked too much to let these plans go to hell now." "I don't care about anyone's damn plans." Temari knew she wasn't getting through to him. Gaara was far too stubborn, and her anger was not going to give her the least bit of leverage. Her eyes stung with bitterness, fingers clenching. "You could at least try to act civil until the invasion." He stood, eyes cold. "Shut up before I kill you." She ground her teeth. "You." The tentacle of sand wrapped around her neck, choking her. She gagged and clawed helplessly at it as her youngest brother stared down at her with cold, unfeeling eyes. "Temari. You can't help me." His eyes reminded her of things she wanted to forget. The weight and pressure of the sand forced her to collapse to her knees, coughing. Miss Yuzu clutched at her bleeding skull, busted open by a fallen shard of glass. Sakata held her by the shoulders, while Temari unfurled her old fan, two blue stars on a background that faded from yellow to red. She could hear screams. What was that? Miss Yuzu asked. It was Sakata who answered. I'd say either the Anbu found us, or someone seriously pissed off one of the higher-ups. What do you say, Goldilocks? Her eyes narrowed. The only ones who have got explosives like that are Asakura's group. Sui, carry Miss Yuzu. I might have to fight to get us out of here. Her heels clicked noisily on stone as they ran, Temari flicking her fan toward anyone who came too close. The borough was in chaos, broken debris lay scattered across the roadways, and brawls around every corner. Fights done with fists and knives and shuriken, but none of it had any direction. Everyone was fighting blindly, the air heavy with the smell of confusion and fear, instinct identifying everyone to be an enemy. Then, the worst possible thing happened. Sakata stumbled. Miss Yuzu's extra weight threw him off balance, and he went crashing to his knees. Temari had already gone half a dozen yards before she realized he was no longer on her heels. The distance was enough to give a confused young man the chance to attack, eyes sparkling with terror, as he brought his wakizashi down in what he felt was self-defense. Miss Yuzu screamed as the blade went through her shoulder and into Sakata's back. Hot blood spurted darkly into the air as the auburn-haired girl rolled to the ground. Temari! Sakata cried. She was already by his side, slamming the handle of her fan into the attacking teen's temple. He crumpled like a puppet with cut strings, his head hitting a stray stone at a bad angle. His body shook with spasms briefly and fell still. Another explosion shook the burrow, the rumbling causing Miss Yuzu to moan. She was losing blood fast. A stray kunai tore through Temari's fan, tearing the paper to shreds. She dropped the now useless weapon, pulling her childhood friend's bloody form onto her back as she knelt by Sakata's side. Blood coated his lips. He coughed raggedly, breath bubbly. Sui. Get up. I can't carry you and Miss Yuzu both. The blonde shouted over the din. Please. We'll get to the surface and go straight to the hospital. Miss Yuzu moaned pitifully. Hit my head, Tima-chan, my head hurts. I think I bumped it on something. The young man didn't seem to hear her, staring absently at the blood-heavy saliva coating his fingertips. He got my lung. Sakata. He looked at her then and she stiffened at the expression glinting in his eyes. Get to the surface, Temari. Miss Yuzu's new enough she won't be tattooed. You know what will happen if you turn me into the hospital. Her eyes burned. I won't leave you here to die. He growled, grabbed the collar of her kimono and kissed her savagely. Tears finally fell. Her mouth flooded with the tang of iron. Oh, Goldilocks. You can't help me this time. Sui. Oh. He roared. She bolted, running like a frightened animal. Miss Yuzu's whimpering cries fell on deaf ears as Temari ran, her mind a haze, her mind functioning on pure instinct. She dodged and avoided every person, projectile, and obstacle without even consciously recognizing the threats. Her back was warm and sticky. She didn't notice her friend's breathing slowly come to a halt. Gaara knelt down to her, crooning softly in her ear. You and Kankuro and Baki, you're my property. I may not see you as my relatives, but you're mine. And no one, not even a prince among demons, is allowed to touch what belongs to me. Where do you think you've been? Temari's palms dug into the tiles, tears falling freely from her eyes. I hate you, she whispered, sometimes, I really hate you, Gaara. I do. You know what will happen. She could hear the sneer in his voice. Just hold on to that feeling, Temari. You'll live. At night, an omen of bad luck, it rained. Temari stared out over the rooftops forlornly, fat droplets of icy rain, plastering her sandy locks to her skin. She sat cross-legged on the edge of the building, hands clutching her elbows. You'll catch cold sitting out here in the rain like that. Temari turned around to face the owner of the voice, seeing her paint-faced brother walking toward her with a blanket in hand. Kankuro. Rain here isn't the same as it is back home. What's wrong? He asked, sitting down behind her and wrapping the blanket around her shoulders, along with his arms. She lowered her eyes. I don't really want to talk about it. He grunted, resting his chin on her shoulder. Neither seemed to care that his face paint was dripping down his cheeks and onto her clothes. Does it have anything to do with the invasion? Or is it Gaara? Both, I guess. He sighed. Temari. It shouldn't have to be like this. She said harshly, cutting him off. We just got over a war, we shouldn't be trying to start a new one. We strived so long for peace, and just when things start looking better it's all shattered just because of Otu-sama's stupid greed. It's ruining everything. Kankuro pulled his head away, frowning. There's more to it than that, Temari, and you know it. The daimyo. Who cares about the damn daimyo? She snapped, whirling around to face him, and Kankuro drew back in shock at her fierce expression, combined with the rain running down her cheeks in place of tears. The daimyo is a self-centered fat bastard who could care less about any military forces, much less our own. Our village could stand without his money if Otu-sama bothered to be more concerned about politics. It's his fault, all his fault, that Gaara. Her shoulders shook slightly from both anger and cold as she spoke, her teeth grinding together tightly. Kankuro sighed and hugged his older sister with strong, firm arms. I know, and it sucks. But we're soon a shinobi, it's our job. We have pride to uphold. I don't like it either, Temari, but no one ever said we had to like our job. Although I won't mind knocking some of those more arrogant leafs their pedestal. She rolled her eyes. Your pride borders on arrogance, you know that. Hey, it's different when you have the skills to back it up. The blonde couldn't help but let loose a chuckle at the statement, and Kankuro pulled away with a smile. That's better. I was starting to worry about you. He said, swiping her wet bangs out of her face. She pushed him playfully. Hey, I'm the big sister, worrying is my job. He grinned, glad to see her looking a bit more cheerful. Stir-fry takeout tonight. She brightened a little and nodded. Extra chestnuts. He squeezed her lightly and kissed her forehead. Love ya, big sis. Her smile widened. Thanks, Kankuro. Love you, too. In order to begin unraveling the puzzle that was the demon prince, a person had to understand two things. 1. Naruto was not a Hanyu in any way, shape or form, or any variation thereof. 2. He did not possess any sort of chakra cloak that changed his outward appearance like Gaara-san did when Ichibi was taking over. Temari knew this due to two factors. The library she had found after the Forest of Death and growing up with a Jinchuriki for a brother. Such experiences had instilled her with a sort of instinctual knowledge and understanding of Jinchuriki, to a certain degree at least. Though she could not connect to such people on a level as deep as the demons within, she understood more than most did. However, as a ninja, she knew all too well that knowing something did not mean it prepared you for the experience. The Ichibi itself was something out of her worst nightmares. Naruto was a Hachibi, she could hardly fathom that in her mind. She found him by the lakeside, having followed the musical sounds produced by a blade of grass held between the thumbs. Nichi bounded up to her, leaping into her arms with a happy cough. The blade of grass fell from Naruto's fingertips, its flash of green as fleeting as the star's twinkle. She stared at his back. Are you angry with me? He glanced at her from over his shoulder, his profile dark in shadow of the moon. His eyes glowed with an eerie blueness. No. I am not angry. She wasn't surprised to be the first one to break eye contact. She stared up at the heavens, stroking Nichi's ears absently. The invasion, it's tomorrow. Ah. What will you do? He pushed himself to his feet, a sigh lacing his words. What I've always done. His presence drew her eyes back down to him. His tails curled about his ankles restlessly, reaching out to caress her calves like the arms of a curious octopus. But what about you? It seemed as if he towered above her. She searched his face for something she didn't know the name to. I don't know, she breathed. I didn't like it in the beginning, but at least then I was sure. But now she shook her head minutely. I'm not sure of anything anymore. Temari, he began, running a hand through his wild mane, I can't tell you what you should or shouldn't do. I only know things from my view. I don't know the motivation behind this attack on Konoha, and, honestly, if the village were outside my territory, I wouldn't lift a tail to help it. When the time comes, however, I pray you do not have to fight me. She let Nichi fall to the ground, lifting her arms to wrap her arms around the demon prince's shoulders. Naruto's breath caught in surprise, but his eyes quickly softened and he slipped his rams about her waist, returning the embrace. Her hair tickled his chin and he buried his nose in brass locks. You asked me to be your friend, Temari spoke softly. He opened his eyes, glancing at the top of her head. You want to know why it was a stupid question. Her breath was warm on his neck. I'm already your friend, Naruto. His lips curled into a smile, his chest rumbling with a chuckle. He moved his hands to her shoulders and pulled out of the embrace. Her eyes were fixated on the ground, looking forlorn. He lifted a claw to her chin, tilting her head up to meet his eyes. His mouth was quirked in an odd little half smile. Good night, Temari, he whispered, leaning down to place a small kiss on her cheek. She blushed all the way to the tips of her ears and he vanished into the night, leaving her to touch her face with hesitant fingers and frozen thoughts. Kankuro sat on the floor, tightening bolts and hinges and screws on his invariable puppet, Karasu. A marionette designed, crafted, and once used by the infamous Asori of the Red Sand. The middle sibling couldn't help but admire the missing nin. The man had been a genius and, if he was still alive out there somewhere, was surely more brilliant than ever. Not that he'd ever want to meet the man. Back in Suna he had two more of Sasori's old puppets, both worn and broken, and in need of Kankuro's touch to repair them into their old selves. His fingers were restless for them. All Karasu needed was a final touch-up to make sure it was in top condition for tomorrow. It didn't require too much of his attention. Truthfully, he couldn't wait to get back to Sunagakure and lock himself in his workroom for at least 2 days. But all of this was irrelevant as to why he was awake so close to midnight. Gaara wasn't the only one who had noticed Temari's semi-unusual behavior. If they were still in their home village, he wouldn't think much of it, but there was no Black Scorpion gang in Konoha, so her nightly disappearances were a cause for concern. He dearly hoped she wasn't betraying them to the enemy, however out of character it would be. He was about to forget about it and go to bed when she walked in, her expression thoughtful. She suppressed a yawn. "Kankuro? What are you still doing up? Waiting for you? You didn't have to do that. You need to rest for tomorrow. We all do," she said, making her way to her room. "Temari," Kankuro stood, "I need to know that you're still with us." Her hand paused on the doorframe. Silence hung between them for several uneasy moments before she sighed. "I don't know what you want me to tell you, Kankuro." "Why?" he pleaded. "I don't understand." She turned to face him, but did not meet his eyes. "I can't say I do either." His face contorted with frustration. "How could you? To your own village? Don't think me so petty," she snapped. "I'm not so lowly as that. I haven't sold Suna out. Her voice quieted. "I can't be a part of this. I won't do anything to prevent it and I won't get in the way, but I just can't be another tool in this invasion." Kankuro slumped his shoulders in defeat. "I'm not going to be able to expect any more of you, am I?" "I'm sorry, Kankuro." He pulled the cowl off his head and scratched his crown. "Don't be. I understand. It'll probably be best that we don't tell Baki about this." His sister nodded solemnly. He rolled his wrist, beckoning her to him. "Come on, at least have some tea before bed." Temari followed, trying not to think about the disaster that lay just ahead. The stands of the Chuunin Exam finals were full of people. Temari narrowed her eyes at the noise from her position in the competitor's viewing box, glancing down the steep walls into the arena. The layout reminded her somewhat sickeningly of the way bored shinobi would sometimes force a pair of scorpions to fight to the death in the bottom of a bucket. Her eyes traveled to the 2 Kages sitting leisurely on their balcony. "Yes, just like that. As if we're insects and they the entertained children pulling our legs off." She paid almost no attention to the fights going on below her, watching the stands with a sharp eye. The outcome of the match between the Hyuga and the Inuzuka was far too predictable. The Uchiha had yet to show up for his match with Gaara, and until he did the invasion could not begin without some major alterations to the plan. Not that anything would go according to plan anyway, she thought to herself, the demon prince was sure to cause mass havoc amongst the invading force, waiting to penetrate Konoha's walls. Temari couldn't stop herself from scowling when Kankuro forfeited. Sending her brother a huff of irritation, she unfurled her fan, creating a cushion of wind to float down on. She landed with a light tap. The smell of dust and the anticipation for a fight brought a smirk to her features. As much as she despised the idea of war, she could never turn down a good fight. "Oh, forget it, I forfeit too." The crowd roared in disapproval and Temari's face crumpled into an expression of fury. "Like hell you will. Get your ass down here and fight me, you lazy bastard." "Damn brats, honestly." The proctor, Genma, sighed. "Winner. Temari. Aburami Shino, get down here." Temari ground her teeth together, her knuckles white as she gripped her battle fan. The playful want for battle was gone. Now she just wanted to kill something, and an Aburami was not going to be an easy opponent to outmaneuver. The high collar wearing genin wasted no time in making his way to the arena, the soft sound of his insects buzzing reaching her ears despite the noisy audience. "He was annoyed I am?" she queried, though not honestly interested in his internal musings. Indeed her opponent didn't appear interested either, his only response the adjustment of his sunglasses. "Begin," the proctor announced, before vanishing out of harm's way in a puff of smoke. For several moments, neither shinobi moved, both beepizing the other warily. Temari's muscles bulged with tension, while Shino kept up a calm facade. It was the Suna Kunweichi who made the first move, swinging a gust forward and forcing the tall teen to leap out of harm's way. She wasn't worried, as long as she could keep the bug using Nin at a distance he shouldn't be able to reach her, however, she had a hunch that beating the man would be as difficult as crushing a roach. "I just have to get one good hit on him," she thought. "He's not so stupid that he'd keep fighting if he needs medical attention." Black spots began crawling over the teen's coat, the beetles buzzing as they crawled out of his body to fight. Temari found herself raising an eyebrow when the other ninja threw a handful of shuriken at her. It was simple to create a small gust to keep them from hitting her, embedding their blades harmlessly in the dirt. "That sort of thing isn't going to work on me, you know. Didn't you learn anything during the prelims?" she shouted, heaving a gust in his direction. Unsurprisingly, he dodged, a few bugs whirling confusedly where he no longer stood. The Konoha threw several more shuriken, and Temari blocked them by throwing a few kunai of her own. The brief clash of metal on metal drew sparks. Both ninja kept their distance, sizing each other up. The brunette took the chance to create several standard bushin, quickly moving the illusions into place to surround her. Temari failed to hold back a smirk as they all ran toward her, dispelling them all with a weak whirlwind and sending the Rilaburami on retreat. Neither shinobi was even playing around, they were still simply testing one another's defenses. She felt something tickle her legs and spared a glance down, eyes widening in surprise. The man had somehow managed to get her bugged. The little black beetles stuck to her calves, slowly sucking out the chakra seeping from her tenketsu. There were only a few of the insects, hardly effective at putting a damper on her chakra reserves on their own, but they were still there, and he had not yet even laid a finger on her. Her eyes darted to the shuriken embedded in the soil, and suddenly it all came together. He hid his bugs in the holes of the throwing stars. It was ingenious really, once the weapons were deflected from their course, she had discarded them as a potential threat, but having his insects stick to the shuriken and burrow their way to her unnoticed, this might actually be fun. She thought gleefully. Temari narrowed her eyes, despite the Aburami's success at bugging her so far, at this rate the battle would be going nowhere fast. At the very least, she wanted to work up a decent sweat. With that thought in mind she charged her opponent. Shino lifted a kunai in defense, but his arm crumpled under the blunt weight of the battle fan. He retaliated by loosing a swarm of bugs as he leapt back into the trees. Damn. Temari cursed, jumping out of the swarm. The insects followed, gluing themselves to her arms, legs, and hair by the hundreds as she flew up into the sky with her fan. She had risen a good 300 yards before allowing herself to dive back down to the arena. Her eyes watered as the wind whipped at her face, dislodging the sticky insects. It was a suicide move unless timed perfectly. The crowd gasped collectively in horror as she neared the ground, headfirst. She felt the last Kakechu dislodge from her ankle and, with a strained cry, forced her fan in front of her. A large cloud of dust and debris plumed and someone in the audience screamed. Shino, on the other hand, allowed a minuscule smirk to cross his lips. Brilliant, he commented, using the wind to cushion you from your fall. You are immensely skilled. The settling dust dispersed in a whirlwind, revealing Temari's unscathed form. Not bad yourself. That's only the second time I've ever had to use that technique. She retorted. But don't think I'm out of the game yet. She shouted the last word, swinging her fan once again toward her opponent. Shino leapt up, but found himself unprepared for his own shuriken slamming into his arms. He landed in a crouch, bleeding as the Kakechu pushed the weapons out of his flesh. Chakra strings. The blonde smirked. You don't grow up among puppet users without picking up a few things. She said, fingertips faintly glowing. Several more shuriken and kunai lifted into the air, seeming to float weightlessly before zooming forward. Shino dissolved into a mass of insects as the projectiles pierced his torso. Frowning, she dropped the cluster of kunai and shuriken, readying her fan for attack at a moment's notice. But the air was undisturbed. Without another second's hesitance, she jumped, manipulating the wind to propel her as high up as necessary. Shino exploded out of the ground, his sneak attack rendered useless. Twisting her body with a graceful backflip, Temari landed in a crouch, fan splayed parallel to the ground. The two warriors stared each other down once again, legs tensed to dart into action once again. However, a leafy whirlwind materialized in the middle of the arena before either shinobi could make his or her next move. Shino's eyebrow developed a violent twitch. Temari was contemplating murder. Bakashi gave a little wave. Are we late? You son of a bitch. Temari exclaimed. Both Hotaki and Uchiha found themselves having to leap apart to avoid being clubbed with a certain San Kanoichi's fan. We're in the middle of a battle here. You. The blonde was cut off when the referee materialized in front of her, looking equally unhappy. As a matter of fact, Hotaki, yes, you are both very late. We were going to extend your time since so many people here want to see the Uchiha, but the two of you have directly violated the laws of the exam. I'm afraid I have to disqualify Uchiha Sasuke for disorderly conduct. Genma didn't look the least bit sorry. Temari smirked, crowing out a mocking laugh, while the crowds hissed and booed their disapproval. Asuna Kunoichi chanced to glance at the Kage's viewing platform. The original signal for the invasion plan was shot to hell. What did her fool of a father plan to do now? As it turned out, she needn't wonder for very long, as an earth-shaking rumble sounded throughout the village, quickly followed by screams and the cries of jutsu. She watched raptly as an Anbu whispered materialized and whispered in the Hokage's ear. In the stands, she noted, the hidden Suna and Odo shinobi looked just as confused as anyone else. The Hokage stood in a great flourish, holding his hands out to hail the populace's attention like some revered priest. Ladies and gentlemen. Please evacuate the stands immediately and make your way to the safe houses. The Chuunin exams are henceforth cancelled. Konohagakure is under at. The announcement was left unfinished as the Kazekage moved to attack his Fire Country counterpart. The viewers in the stands panicked as Sand and Sound Ninja discarded their disguises. She witnessed the first blood draw on a man in the audience, too far away to discern his face, caught by a jutsu that tore into his chest and continued its destructive path even as it ripped out his backside. With none of the civilians under a sleeping gain jutsu as originally planned, this battle was likely to turn out twice as bloody. Temari turned her attention to the several leaf shinobi still in the arena with her. She placed her fan on the ground in a sign of surrender. The four males acknowledged her effort and she suddenly found Shino guarding her back. "If you're not against us, are you with us?" he asked, kunai held at the ready. Temari debated for a split moment if it would be a good idea to draw her own weapon, pulling out several shuriken as she concluded it was unwise to be without defense in the middle of battle. "Only in so many words," she replied, "just don't ask me to go against my brothers." She blocked a stray kunai. She felt the male's back press against her and reacted instinctively, switching their positions. A swarm of insects burst forth from Shino's palm, the Kakechu quickly spreading to seek out comrades. "In that case I suggest you get out of the village as quickly as possible. The longer you are within the city walls the more likely you are to be mistaken for an enemy and attacked by someone of Konoha. Anything you can do to disrupt the invading forces on your way out will be of great assistance to us. I don't think the shinobi outside the walls are going to be much of a problem. That's already covered." Temari said back, lashing out at a sound nin with a weak wind jutsu without her fan. Her offensive strength was greatly diminished. She caught Shino's eye over her shoulder and had the sense that he was frowning. "By whom?" Naruto had never been fond of snakes. Kyuubi had never been fond of them either, and he absently wondered if was some ingrained influence of his foster father that he so despised serpents. Dealing with common snakes native and not native to the area flocking to his territory for the better part of a month was bad enough, but having to stare down a 150-foot summon really took the cake. At least the two-headed monster wasn't so stupid as to think the demon prince of Konoha wasn't a threat. Oh, no, it could certainly sense that much, but he was becoming increasingly agitated that what the beast lacked in intelligence, it made up for with sheer size and brute strength. Not that Naruto was without inhuman strength himself. Sending his animal opponent crashing through Konoha's outer wall was proof of that, however unplanned, but he was no ninja, and battling a creature larger than most buildings could hardly be called even ground. "And I've no animal form until the 9th tail is received," he thought sourly, dodging a swipe of the serpent's tail. His whiskers stood on end, alerting him to even the slightest change in the air around him. Teeth bared, he turned to the gaping Konohan hiding in the trees. "You know, the least you shinobi could do is make yourselves useful out here," he snarled. Apparently snapped out of their odd stupor, several jutsu blasted out from the trees, crashing into the snake's scaly body. The demon prince's fingertips glowed dully, his claws growing and hardening into a set of deadly talons. He wasted no time taking advantage of the great serpent's distraction, leaping into the air and latching onto the monster's body, nails puncturing the dinner plate-sized scales as he climbed up its spine to its left head. Unfortunately, the right head spotted the golden-haired demon and lunged for him. Naruto did the only thing he could do to prevent falling off. He dug his fingers straight into the oncoming head's eyeball and held on tight. The beast let out a horrible shriek, flailing violently as the sensation of pain reached its brain. Ocular fluid and blood dripped down the demon prince's arm as he swung himself to the top of the head and used the momentum of the thrashing to drive his hand into the other eye. It wailed again, this time crashing to the forest floor, forcefully knocking him off. It was an easy feat for Naruto to break his fall, speeding through the air gracefully and using his many tails to catch himself in the uppermost boughs of a tree. He planted his feet solidly on the trunk, nails digging into the branches. He had hoped that the damage done thus far would be enough to coax the summoned beast into dispersing, but as the uninjured head swung its enormous cranium around, it seemed that it would not be so. "You? With the green bear mask?" Naruto barked. Said Anbu glanced up at him in surprise. "I need some of your kunai." "Oh, okay," the man said, throwing several of the weapons up to the demon. "You're on our side." Naruto scowled down at the human, small fan snapping open in his hand. "I live here too, don't I? Try to keep it occupied for me," he exclaimed, pushing off the tree and leaping back into action. Working fast, he placed one of the kunai between the folds of the fan and narrowing his eyes to take aim. 3 kunai, 3 shots. One of the ninja had managed to get himself onto the snake's body and blew a stream of fire up at the uninjured head. Hissing furiously, the beast turned to focus on the pint-sized human. Naruto swung the fan and let the kunai fly, propelled forward by wind. The blades, metal and wind alike, struck true, burrowing deep into the serpent's pupil. Again the great summon shrieked in agony, thrashing as its sight was diminished further. The blind head tasted the air with its tongue, hissing fiercely as its nose swiveled to focus on the hidden demon prince, as the left head continued to focus on the ninja. The sightless head slithered toward Naruto, splitting off from the main body. Naruto swore under his breath and leapt away as the beast lunged, turning the ancient tree he had been perched on to little more than splinters. Its thick purple tongue flicked about wildly, sniffing him out. The blonde demon ground his teeth together and slipped the second kunai into the fan. However, the snake wasn't giving him the chance to make his attack, lunging after him with single-minded determination, forcing him into a retreat. Whatever openings there were in the summon's pursuit, Naruto didn't have the time to take advantage of. He flitted through the trees as if he were the wind itself. He let the second kunai fly, hoping for a lucky shot, but missed. There was an explosion and suddenly a giant foot crunched down into the snake's head, immediately forcing it to vanish in a thick haze of smoke. Naruto skidded to a stop, the smell of amphibian overpowering his nose. He leapt back, landing on the dirt by the new summon's foreleg. He looked up, neck arching. "Hey. You up there? Just whose battle do you think you're fighting?" The toad fixed one enormous golden eye on him, a man with shaggy white hair popping into view soon after. "I am fighting Konoha's battle." He leapt off the great amphibian, landing in a deep crouch. "I should be the one asking whose battle. Holy shit, you're that guy." Naruto quirked an eyebrow and crossed his arms. "That guy?" he repeated. "Yeah. You're the demon prince. You're supposed to be a myth." The toad summoner exclaimed. The fox demon suppressed the urge to roll his eyes. "Sorry to disappoint. Now, if you'll excuse me," he made an exaggerated show of bowing, flourishing his rapidly tattering cloak behind him. "There are still a great many invaders to get rid of, and I do not wish to waste time conversing. Sayonara." He leapt away, his form quickly swallowed by green foliage. Kohamaru suppressed the urge to voice his discomfort as his two best friends held onto the scarf wrapped around his neck. The three of them had already gotten separated once in the chaos of Konoha streets, they didn't want to lose sight of each other again. The three children tucked themselves behind a garbage can as more experienced ninja ran through the cobblestone streets. He glanced back at his friends. Megii was biting her lip worriedly, while Uden's nose was running more than usual as tears streamed from his eyes. "We sure chose the wrong day to play hooky, guys," he muttered. "Understatement of the year," Megii shouted. Kohamaru slapped a hand over her mouth, effectively shutting her up and making her even more irritated. "Quiet. Do you want the enemy to find us?" Megii wilted at that, shoving the boy's hand away. Kohamaru focused back on the street, waiting for it to empty. "We have to get out to the forest," he muttered. His friends started at that. "The forest?" Uden began fearfully. "Are you crazy?" The female of the group hissed, "That's forbidden. Do you want to be eaten by the demon prince? You actually believe that crap?" Konohamaru retorted, making them flinch. "It's that or the invading ninja." He glanced at the street. It was clear. "Now. Hurry." The grandson of the Hokage darted into the open, his friends following somewhat hesitantly. He dug his fingers into the earth, dragging up the lid of the manhole. The hole seemed a void. "That in?" Uden jumped down into the darkness. Megii turned a bit green, hesitating. "But, Konohamaru-kun, that." "I said get down," the boy exclaimed, pushing her into the hole. She vanished with a small shriek, falling into her other teammates' waiting arms. Konohamaru knelt, preparing to jump down into the manhole, when a gray figure caught his eye. He whipped around, eyes wide. "Satsuma-kun," he exclaimed, embracing the fox tightly as it jumped to place its forepaws in his chest. The three-tailed kitsune licked the boy's cheek and coughed. Konohamaru's stomach dropped to his knees, the blood draining from his face. "Hey, are you sure?" Satsuma coughed again. "Konohamaru-kun," Megii called from below. "What's going on up there? What is it?" The brunette boy bit his lip, shifting his eyes from the hole in the middle of the street to his fox friend and back again. He swallowed thickly and stared down the hole toward the other boy and girl. "Follow the tunnel to your right and whenever you come to a fork, continue taking the right path. Move as fast as you can." Uden's eyes widened. "But, Konohamaru-kun. You're coming with us, right?" Megii interrupted, her eyes filling with tears, "Right." He grabbed a hold of the lid again, pulling it back over the opening. "Sorry guys. I have to help Grandpa. You guys get to the forest and stay safe." The lid closed, the sound echoing like a death toll. "Let's go, Satsuma-kun." His sandals tapped noisily on the stone as he ran away, and Megii began crying in earnest. "Konohamaru-kun." She sobbed even as Uden took her hand and pulled her deeper into the sewage pipe. "Konohamaru-kun. Konohamaru-kun. And I thought the plan was screwed before. Nope, now it's really all blown to hell." Kankuro thought sourly. He should have seen it coming, honestly, since when did Gaara ever do anything other than what suited his desires? And right now Gaara was intent on following Temari for a reason Kankuro couldn't even begin to imagine. "Come on, Gaara. We can find Temari later." "What about the plan?" the paint-faced man pressed. "I don't care about that." So we're just going to leave the other Suna shinobi out to dry. This plan can't fall through without you. Shut up. The Redeed snarled. Let them rot. I have to kill him. The puppet wielder was caught by surprise. Him? Him who? Gaara didn't even spare him a glance. The demon prince. Kankuro chuckled nervously, beads of sweat forming on his brow. Gaara, you know that guy's not real. He's just a legend. Not so, he's the one Temari has been slinking off to meet. The Jinchuriki's voice was thick with disgust. He glanced over his shoulder, and Kankuro felt his stomach flip in terror at the look in the Redeed's eye. Now shut up and do as I tell you or I'll give your blood to mother. Kankuro could do nothing else but follow. As they always did, the walls of Konoha's underground tunnel system dripped with moisture. Temari found it incredibly difficult to feel her way around in the dark, but managed, the Kakechu, riding on the back of her hand, making soft clicking noises. The roots that held the walls felt like bloody veins between her fingers. If she closed her eyes, she could almost imagine that the wetness between her fingers was a life-giving fluid rather than water. She paused, shivering at the gory thought. Indiscernible whispers floated to her ears. The tunnel seemed to breathe. She squeezed her hand into a fist, cold fingers stinging her warmer palm. The beetle clicked. But, the whispers grew louder. The echoes clearing into a pair of timid voices. Temari's fear evaporated like morning mist. Those were not the murmurs of a phantom. She retraced her steps, nearly colliding into two children as she rounded a corner. Ah! The girl screamed. They found us, Uden-kun. Run, Megii-chan. Scowling at their screams, Temari lashed out, grabbing both youngsters by the backs of their shirts. Quiet down. You want to bring the entire village down here? I'm not the enemy. The two stopped struggling and the boy struck a match, illuminating their faces. But, you're a Chunin. The girl sniveled. Temari held out her hand, showing them the Kakechu. Yeah, and I backed out. Uden adjusted his glasses, squinting at the insect. It's definitely one of the Aburami bugs. I think we really can trust her, Megii-chan. I don't believe she's lying. Temari blinked as she took in the two preteens' visages. Hey, you're those brats that my brother picked a fight with. Where's the other one of your group? The carrot-haired girl glared at the older woman before crumpling into tears. Her companion hugged her awkwardly, sniffing. He looked up at Temari. Kohamaru-kun was supposed to come with us. But he left. He said he had to help his grandpa, the Hokage. She felt the blood drain from her face. The brat was just a kid, what did he think he could do? No way, but the Hokage is fighting against my father right now. A twerp like him will just get fried. Your father? The Kazekage. You're related to the Kazekage. Then can't you go and do something? Megii cried harder. If you're his daughter then why don't you stop this? Temari stiffened before wilting. She looked away from the two. I can't do anything either, admitting that was a hard pill to swallow. He may be my father, but that hardly counts for anything. He's practically a stranger. If I got in the way, he'd cut me down like anyone else. Silence fell over them, broken only by Megii's sobbing. An echo reached them. Something had shifted, a fallen rock perhaps. Temari's senses went on high alert, a kunai appearing in each hand. Her eyes scanned the darkness, but saw nothing. She shifted her weight to the balls of her feet. Put out that match, she said, we've got to get moving. Follow me. Uden did as told, dragging Megii along by Kohamaru's scarf. The match sputtered and died on the wet ground. Temari had a feeling, though, that it wasn't enough. There was no moss this deep in the tunnels to quiet their footsteps, and she wasn't sure if the other two knew how to walk on walls yet. Wah. Megii hiccuped loudly, falling to her knees without warning. Temari skidded to a stop as the boy knelt by his friend, fruitlessly trying to console her. Temari marched up to the two and hauled the girl to her feet. Quiet. Stop crying. I'm trying. Megii hiccuped. I see can't stop. Temari pressed her lips together, having experienced hysterics herself before. Uden looked up at the blonde with doleful eyes. They were both still children, just a couple kids with dreams who had only read about war in books. This was a world-altering experience for them. I was right to back out, she thought, this invasion, this provocation of war, it's wrong, on more levels than any of us realized. Temari furrowed her eyebrows and yanked Megii onto her back, hooking her hands under the girl's knees. The red-headed girl pressed her nose into Temari's shoulder, still crying. The blonde glanced back at the brunette boy. Take hold of my elbow, okay? And don't let go. If you have to sprint to keep up, sprint, got it? Uden nodded and grabbed onto her. Once she was sure that the boy's grip was secure, they took off running. The earth squished beneath their sandals too noisily for comfort. Megii cried softly into the shell of her ear, drawing out any smaller sound she could have picked up. Uden stumbled, but managed to keep himself from falling, working his legs to keep up with the taller ninja. The light appeared ahead, much to Temari's relief, and they burst out of the earth into the open air and sun. Right into a group of sound nin. Temari swore under her breath, but took advantage of them not attacking with her Suna hit I-8 in plain view. They didn't think she was a threat. "Suna-san." One of them called as she slid Megii off her back, "You've got hostages. Things have gone bad here, but with those two you may have saved us." Uden glared up at the blonde. You liar." Temari rolled her eyes, drawing several throwing stars. "Don't be so naive, kid." Fuden. Kaiten shuriken. The shuriken tore through a number of the Odo shinobi, the blades having been extended several feet thanks to wind chakra. Blood sprayed into the air and freckled her cheeks and forehead. She held up a kunai defensively, shuriken nestled between the knuckles of her other hand as she stood over the two children. "Head back," she shouted as the invaders charged her. "K's no yaba." The children vanished into the foliage, but this time the sound nin were ready for her and they dodged the blade of wind with ease, her attack only managing to hit one of the nin. However, that still left 8 ninja out of what had been a group of 12, and that was 8 too many. 4 she could have handled. Atagakure was a new village, and its quality of ninja were still mediocre compared to Suna's high-quality genin, but, no matter what was said, quantity had a sharp edge on quality when it came to warfare, and Odo had cannon fodder to spare. The remaining 8 regarded her warily, forming a half-circle around her. The leader of the sound squad glared at her, twirling his kunai in his hand. "Aren't you gutsy? Going against protocol, a traitor your own country. The only one I've betrayed is the Kazekage." Temari snarled, "I act in the best interests of my village." She could see the bulge of the man's cheek as she grinned beneath his mask. "I'm not going to kill you, no, I'm going to drag your sorry carcass to Lord Orochimaru and let you answer to him." She gave the man a stiff middle-fingered salute. "Up yours. I am to none but the Kazekage, so Orochimaru can kiss Suna's big sandy ass." The group exchanged glances, laughing breathily. The sound sent shivers up Temari's spine. "Of course, you don't know." The leader spoke up again, "The Yondai Mei Kazekage has been dead for weeks. So, you know, in a roundabout way, the one you answer to is Orochimaru-sama." Temari felt as if her heart had stopped. "They killed Otu-sama." Rage bubbled up within her, a fiery, boiling mass of hate writhing in her blood like a living creature. Her face reddened with unbridled anger, and the shuriken points dug into her palm. "They killed Otu-sama." The group's leader gurgled, a horrible red flower blooming from his neck. He gripped at his neck, fingers prodding through the ravaged flesh into his esophagus. He coughed, blood dripping down his chin, and collapsed. Alarmed, the other nin stared at their dying comrade. "What the?" Limbs went flying, quickly followed by the sound shinobi's screams. "Fuden. Ken no Zanzetsu Jutsu." Temari whispered. 3 of the enemy writhed on the ground, moaning as they clutched their now useless legs, the backs of their heels and knees destroyed. Of the other 5, 2 were unscathed, 1 was missing his fingers, another's arm rendered immobile, and the last sported a badly bloodied skull, his left ear clean gone. Temari ground her teeth to the point of pain. The remaining capacitated ninjas stood against her, their stances defensive. She held her own weapons out, preparing to attack them again. The sound troop dug their toes into the ground and hightailed it in the other direction. Temari desperately wanted to chase after them, but forced herself to stay put. Legs trembling, she forced her anger into a tiny, uncomfortable knot in her stomach. The sound group was not important, they were hardly even a threat. Uden and Megii were important. She exhaled, feeling calmness wash over her as she got her emotions in check. Professionally, she attended to the remaining, writhing ninja and mercifully slit their throats. She wiped her bloodied hands on the grass and stood, walking to the cave and surrounding foliage. She brushed a draping fern aside with the back of her hand. "Megii-san. Uden-san. It's all clear," she called. There was no response. The children had gone. Kohamaru hardly noticed the smoke even as it brought tears to his eyes and scorched his esophagus. Konoha was on fire, but neither he nor his foxy companion had abilities with which to put out the flames. Thankfully, no one was in need of being saved. Perched atop the Grey Reynard's back, the two dashed past. The buildings would just have to burn. Satsuma's padded feet made no sound on the ground, so different from the Inyazuka dog's noisy claws, Kohamaru thought. But now was not the time for such trivial thoughts. His home was currently being used as a battleground, and he was better off planning ahead. An squadron of sound nin emerging from within a collapsed building was the perfect example of that, he observed ironically. The masked assailants charged at the two without hesitation. "Satsuma-kun. High ground." The young Sarutobi exclaimed. The fox snarled, leaping back out of the reach of the shinobi's weapons, and took to the rooftops. The enemy was hot on their trail, following from below. Glancing down at them, the brunette boy pulled down his eyelid and stuck out his tongue. Kunai whizzed by his ear and he threw several back, but didn't manage to hit anyone. Satsuma made an unexpected sharp turn, and Kohamaru went tumbling off the animal's back. The enemy descended upon him like a pack of wolves, and he scampered to his feet. The Sambi leapt onto one man's back, biting deeply into the Odonin's shoulder. The man screamed, stumbling back as hot blood quickly soaked his clothing. Taking advantage of the momentary distraction, Kohamaru made a hand seal, a swell of smoke exploding from his feet to hide him. The men held their weapons at the ready, prepared for anything. Or so they thought. Mina-san. The well-endowed, stark-naked woman crooned, surely you don't want to hurt me? She moved to cover her most intimate places with delicate hands. Wouldn't you much rather play with me? Because I want to play with you, ooh-oh. She winked and blew a kiss. They dropped like flies. The busty brunette smirked and transformed back into a young boy. Kohamaru laughed, clutching his gut. Ha ha ha. Behold, the world's most deadly jutsu, the technique which even the greatest Kage falls prey to. Oriak no jutsu. Still grinning, he turned to his kitsune friend, climbing onto the creature's back. He tried to seem unaffected by the sight of Satsuma's bloodied muzzle. The fox, however, was unfooled and comfortingly wrapped a tail around the child. Are you sure about this, Kohamaru-kun? He growled softly. Kohamaru swallowed thickly, but nodded. I'm sure. Grandpa isn't a young Hokage anymore, he's going to need our help. Satsuma coughed and took off running again across the rooftops. The fox could run faster than most ninja, and they were rapidly approaching the final arena, which stood out like a giant fishbowl. The sounds of crackling fire and breaking wood beams faded, but even though there was no one to be seen fighting outside the enormous building, screams could be heard echoing from inside. The man's throat collapsed with a sickening sound not unlike a plastic cup being crushed. He collapsed, bloody and writhing, without so much as the ability to scream. Naruto snapped his hand back, his claws flinging into another ninja's forehead. He could feel the ridges of the man's brain tissue under the pads of his fingertips. The enemy fell and died with a soft cry. Cringing, the yellow-haired demon cleaned his hand of gore by running it through the hair of another one brave enough no, not brave. Just stupid he thought to charge at him. Caught off guard, the man stumbled and backed up into the ranks, eyes wide. Where do they all come from? Naruto wondered. The Odo forces, while unskilled, were seemingly endless in number with a chunin occasionally popping up amongst the mass. The idea itself was highly unrealistic, he knew they weren't really endless, but while he could go on killing like this for hours, it was the blood that was proving to be a problem for him. His body hummed, muscles taut. The smell of blood was deep in his sinuses, he could practically taste it and he panted, salivating uncontrollably. He wiped away the trail of drool trickling from a corner of his mouth. If you want to live, Naruto rasped, get out of Fire Country now. Or I'll devour you all. This is my territory. And no one touches that village but me. The smart ones turned tail and fled. The beepy idiots remained and ran at the demon. Naruto glared at the group, his tails whipping out to grasp their necks. The limbs tightened and twisted, 8 men dropped dead with a simultaneous snapping sound. Several more fled. The others paused, more cautious than ever, but Naruto hardly noticed them. He could feel his pupils dilating, teeth growing sharper. His throat felt parched, and there was a hefty supply of human meat all around him. Pain exploded from his abdomen, and he looked down to see a man sticking him with a kunai. At first, the masked invader thought the demon was collapsing forward due to the wound, but the teeth of a carnivore sunk into his neck. He screamed, hands flying up to grasp at the blonde's head desperately. Naruto tore out his jugular. For a moment he stood in a daze, blood dripping down his chin. Then, quite suddenly, he dropped to all fours and vomited. He muttered. But the smell of stomach acid had overpowered the reek of human blood, allowing his sense of mind to clear. The remaining ninja had taken off once he'd bitten that last one, convinced that he wasn't kidding when he said he would devour them. Naruto stood, a bit shakily, and spat bile and blood. Not that he had been kidding in the first place, most demons had a berserker reflex when it came to human blood. Few could overcome that bloodlust. In the past, controlling the desire had not been too much of a problem, but with his 16th birthday so close, his senses were destabilizing to make adjustments for the final tale. And father's death, he thought bitterly. The smell of blood was still thick in the air, and he quickly left the tainted area before his bloodlust went on the rise again. He perched himself in the highest tree in the area, gazing across the sea of green trees. Smoke rose from within the walls of Konoha, but that was not his concern, nor was he concerned. In the distance, he spotted the enormous toad summon he had run into earlier stomping through the trees. Though his fight with the snake summon had left an enormous hole on Konoha's outer wall, the enemy was no longer flooding into the opening. Most were fleeing, sensible enough to know that the invasion was now a lost cause. Konoha had the upper hand now and was overtaking their adversaries with ease. From this vantage point he could make out the howls of the Inuzuka clan dogs and even hear some of the names of jutsu being called out. There was an almost silent humming sound flitting through the air. Should he let go of the tree and allowed himself to drop? A shuriken whizzed overhead, lopping off the crown of the tree. The weapon crumbled into sand and rushed at him. Naruto furrowed his brow and spat out a bright blue flame, turning the sand to glass and rendering it useless. His tail lashed out, catching him on a branch. He stared out through the foliage. The wind rustled as if response to his anger. Gaara-san. Iridid emerged from the trees, his face a distorted grin. The sand encasing his body was restless. A second form hesitantly emerged from the trees, and Naruto's eyebrows rose in surprise. He must be Temari's other brother, Kankuro. He is real, he heard Kankuro mutter. Demon Prince, Gaara announced, I have come to kill you. Smirking lightly, Naruto allowed himself to drop into view. So formal, Gaara-san. It seems unlike you. Why the change? Gaara met the Hachibi's smirk. You aren't an insect. The blonde's eyes curved into slits. Is that so? I suppose I ought to be flattered then. His cheerful facade dropped. But you won't kill me. Don't be so sure. Gaara snarled. The gourd on his back slid across his arm and face, giving itself the falsetto appearance of stretched leather. Kankuro had never been more afraid than he was now. He was not afraid of many things, and he feared those things with good reason. First and foremost was his younger brother. Gaara was not just a force to be reckoned with, he was a force of nature, a living embodiment of humanity's sins. But there was one thing he had always believed in, and it was something that even applied to the monster that was his brother. There is always someone stronger. Despite that, he had never truly believed that he would ever encounter the person that could make Gaara's power seem small, not in his lifetime at least. Yet here he stood, eyes locked on the golden haloed being with blood down the front of its Haori, who radiated such a presence that he didn't even notice his brother transforming beside him. He looked into the tailed being's alien blue eyes and knew. Gaara didn't stand a chance. He also knew that there was nothing he could say or do that would change Gaara's mind about fighting this other demon. His red-heated little brother would sooner suffocate him with sand to shut him up than back out of this. If Temari were here, she would have spoken up regardless, but Kankuro wasn't like her in that aspect, and he found himself slinking out of sight to safety. Sorry, Gaara, he thought to himself, maybe if we were back home you'd stand a chance, but you forget, this is his turf, and you don't have hundreds of miles of sand to save your ass. Where do you think you're going? Gaara spoke suddenly, turning his head to look upon his older sibling. Kankuro felt the hairs on his arms stand on end. Already half of Gaara's face was transformed. He swallowed tightly. Out of your way. He said hopefully. Something pain flashed through the red-head's eyes, and the sand crawled over more of his body. No. You're doing it too. You're in on it with Temari, aren't you? You're betraying me too. Gaara, Kankuro whispered, astonished. How can you say that? He shouted. You never trusted us to begin with, so how could we betray you? The tail dropped into existence. He could hear Gaara's pointed teeth grinding together fiercely and wondered if he had been wrong, if, in his own emotionally stunted way, Gaara had trusted them. Or at least had tried to. He made plenty of death threats, but the two older siblings got away with things Gaara usually killed people for. The demon container seemed to explode, rushing at the brunette furiously. I'll kill you before you can betray me. Overtaken with fear, Kankuro braced himself for death, but found something soft hit him instead. Fingers wrapped around his forearm and pulled him up. He opened his eyes to the face of the yellow-haired demon. Naruto didn't yet glance at the man in his grip. He pressed his back against a tree trunk and peered out at Gaara, who tore at the trees angrily. A deep gash had been cleaved into his shoulder, an attack meant for Kankuro. Said human gaped at him, speechless. Yuha, why that? Naruto turned his gaze to the paint-faced shinobi. You'd best get out of here. Find your sister if you can. It's true then. The older male said. You know Temari. Yes, but it's the least of our worries right now. Turning from Kankuro, he mumbled into his sleeve, Kanko-chan. The head of a tiny fox emerged from the clothing, its serpentine body slithering out to hover by his ear. The peach-furred fox blinked at its master with beady, vertically slanted eyes. It made a soft crooning sound and opened its tiny mouth in a yawn, nuzzling its head against Naruto's cheek. Kanko-chan, I need you to find someone for me. The mouse-sized creature blinked. Her name is Temari. She comes from Wind Country. It shouldn't be hard for you to track her. I left a kiss on her cheek. You kissed my sister. Later, Kankuro-san. Naruto snapped. Kanko-chan will guide you. Take this to Temari as well. He handed the other male the small fan Temari had given him so long ago. Now get going. Gaara had found them, due to Kankuro's surprised shout, and Naruto shoved the puppet user off the branch as he leapt toward the other Jinchuriki, claws extended. Despite his surprise and growing anger at the yellow-furred demon, how dare that weirdo kiss his sister? He caught himself quickly, skidding down the bark to the grassy earth below. Though some long-forgotten part of him screamed to stay and help, though help who, he wasn't entirely sure, he knew better than to look a gift horse in the mouth. He glanced curiously at the pipe fox as it tickled his ear and made his getaway. The arena was in poor shape. Of course, that was due to the shinobi battles taking place everywhere. Battle arena indeed. Konohamaru thought. He wove through the ally and enemy forced with ease no one could spare to let down their guard to gaze after a small boy on a fox. That didn't prevent a few from falling to their deaths as they strangled out an astonished fearful cry of demon fox. Satsuma used speed alone, not chakra, to run up the wall of the jutsu-beaten arena and to the Kage platform. However, Konohamaru's grandfather was not among the nin settled there. Instead, he found his eyes settled upon a great transparent box, tinted violet with chakra. It was impossible to see inside, trees curled and twisted on the rooftop like many crippled bonsai. A dozen Anbu stood around the barrier, their hands twitching restlessly, their expressionless masks staring out from under their hoods like Shinigami waiting to swoop in on a kill. But they weren't bloodthirsty, they were agitated and more than a little afraid. Konohamaru urged Satsuma toward them, and the fox settled gracefully by a cat-masked ninja. "Honorable grandson." The Anbu squad leader exclaimed, identified by the white cloak he wore. "You shouldn't be here. It is dangerous." Konohamaru shot the man a look. "Too bad. I'm not going to sit by while the enemy invades the village I'm named after." He slipped off Satsuma's back, standing tall. "Now, what is going on?" The white cloak ninja hesitated before consenting to the boy's demand. "Suna has betrayed us. The Kazekage was Orochimaru in disguise. I believe it's sensible to assume that Suna is not aware of the replacement. Orochimaru's garden erected this barrier before we could reach Sandaemi-sama. There's no way through. Then Orochimaru he has used a forbidden jutsu. Ito Tensei. Ito Tensei? He has raised the dead to fight, cowardly serpent that he is. The Shodaime-sama and Nidaime-sama are fighting Sarutobi-sama right now, I imagine." The preteen's eyes widened in horror. "No way, we've got to get in there and help." The man who attempted to breach it died on impact and his body was consumed by fire. "We have tried several jutsus, but there is no way for us to penetrate it." Konohamaru's mind was racing as he took in the situation. His eyes roamed over the enormous chakra barrier preventing anyone from helping his grandfather. No way to break in, then, just like a safe his eyes lit up. "I've got it. Hey, you, red-haired chick." He called, running up the roof, slipping just out of the Anbu's reach. Said shinobi gave the boy a strange look as he approached, three-tailed fox by his side. "Weirdo. What the fuck do you want? Is there any chance you could let little Almi in? Pretty please." She laughed mockingly. "Dumbass kid. Of course not. What are you, retarded?" Konohamaru pouted exaggeratedly. "Fine, if you won't let me in, maybe your friend will. Hey, you, big guy." The bulky nin looked over and met the redeed's eyes, both dangerously confused. "The hell? Language, Tayuya." She whipped her head around as the boy vanished in white smoke. "What are you?" Her words died in her throat, eyes widening to an impossible size. The other ninja's face bloated with red. "Oh my. Ah, hello big boy," crooned a very curvy naked woman with Tayuya's face. "Won't you let me in? I've been so very bad, I need Orochimaru-sama to punish me. Unless," she lifted her shoulders minutely, pressing a finger to her bottom lip, "unless you want to do it." The man looked like he was about to hemorrhage to unconsciousness at any moment. You little fucker. Just whose tits do you think you're flashing, you little shit-eating beep sucker?" "Tayuya, no." But it was already too late. The woman leapt out of position, her concentration on the barrier jutsu dissolving into rage. "I'm going to fucking kill you." The Anbu wasted no time rushing in now that the barrier was gone. Konohamaru jumped out of Tayuya's rampaging path with the aid of Satsuma. She glared up with death in her eyes as he blew a raspberry at her. "Don't you know?" he shouted at her, still in the form of the Kunoichi's naked body. "A woman's deadliest weapon is her body. Shut the fuck up and let me kill you, shitston. You don't make a very convincing argument. RRGH. You're going to be hamburger meat by the time I'm through with you, you little bastard." She roared, whipping out, to Konohamaru's surprise, a flute. "I'm going to play you a melody of death." Konohamaru released the transformation, landing heavily on the roof tiles opposite her. Battles raged around them, the sound shinobi finding themselves each facing two or more Anbu. He watched as the many armed ninja shot out some net-like jutsu and another suddenly became two people. Three more Anbu leapt at Nidaime, over only one person was taking on the Shodaime cat. Trees and wood burst from the rooftop beneath both men's feet. "I didn't know any of the Shodaime's descendants had Mokuton. Does the legendary Tsunade have an illegit kid or something?" Konohamaru wondered. Tayuya's lips neared her flute and the young boy sent a kunai whizzing by her cheek, gaining him a few seconds. He knew better than to assume it was an ordinary flute. "Satsuma-kun, go help grandpa." The Reynard yipped in protest. "You'll be able to do more against Orochimaru than the Anbu can. I can hold my ground against this chick." "I don't know what you're planning over there," the Redeed growled, "but it won't be enough to save your scrawny ass." The human fox team charged her, much to her lack of surprise. She reeled back as the fox neared, its jaws outstretched to sink its fangs into her arm. And it sailed right by. Her eyebrows rose. That had been unexpected, and she nearly managed to avoid the kid's fist aiming for her nose. He jumped back as soon as he was aware of his miss, but her fingers caught onto his long blue scarf. "You filthy rat." She snarled. The fact that the Sanbi was headed for Orochimaru was not lost on her. She had underestimated the young boy. Konohamaru gagged and scowled as he lifted his hands to grip the material around his neck. "I'm not a rat," he shouted, concentrating his chakra. "If anything, I'm more of a cross between a fox," the scarf whipped into life, twisting itself around the stunned Kunoichi's body, "and a monkey." "What the fuck is this?" she exclaimed, feeling the material tighten around her like she— "Ah, isn't it obvious?" Konohamaru declared haughtily, "My scarf is made of a special chakra-conducting material. It's also fire-resistant, water-resistant, stain-resistant, and resistant. Good luck getting out of this." He dashed forward, swiping her flute right out of her fingers. "Hey shit. Especially without your flute," he continued, waving it around in his hand. "I don't know what you use this thing for, but playing some lame-ass lullaby isn't going to put me to sleep." Yuyu snarled. "Don't talk about my music that way." He leered at her. "Ooh-oh. Touchy aren't, what are you doing?" Jagged cold black lines began spreading across her skin as if invisible hands were scribbling on her with markers. The surge of chakra that pulsated from her body caused his scarf to fall away, return to its traditional state of limp harmless cloth. The cap she wore was torn to shreds by the horns now sprouting from her skull. She grinned. "You're so dead." "Oh, shit." Megii and Uden, truthfully, had no idea where they were running. Uden just knew that they had to find someplace safe. As soon as he'd figured out that the Suna Kunoichi had tricked them, he took Mogi's hand and had taken off. That Kakechu must have been one of the female bugs, he reasoned, and when she found it, she decided to use it to trick us instead of killing it like most people would do. Damn. I can't believe I fell for something so obvious. There was almost no fighting going on now. Konoha was driving out the last of the invaders, but Uden still felt that hunkering down under a thorny bush would be a bad idea. The threat was not over yet. He had initially thought of taking to the tunnels again, but dismissed the idea as quickly as it came. He and his teammate would almost certainly get lost, and the Suna woman seemed to know her way around those passages. That would definitely have been a bad idea. Not that we're doing much better right now, he thought bitterly. The forests outside Konoha's walls were forbidden territory and therefore foreign, despite being on the village's doorstep. And the forest was as protective as it was foreboding. It was nearly impossible to see the sky through the canopy, and the closeness of the trees pressed down like claustrophobia. Their chakras felt muted, and Uden wondered if jutsus would work as effectively here. "Uden-kun," Megii gasped, "I've gotta stop." He glanced back at her. "Not now, Megii-chan, it's not safe here." "No, Uden-kun, I have to stop." She stumbled as soon as the last syllable passed her lips and collapsed to all fours, panting heavily. Her fingers sank into the loam until she was wrist-deep in soft green moss. Her cheeks were flushed red with exhaustion. Uden felt his legs trembling and wondered how he had missed the burning pain eating at his thighs. Adrenaline, his mind supplied fleetingly, it was not important. "Okay," he breathed, "we can rest, but only for 5 minutes. We need to keep moving. That's all I need." She spoke, focusing on steadying her breathing so that she wouldn't hyperventilate. He crumpled down alongside her, racking his mind for a solution to their situation. Had always been the brains of the team, despite Konohamaru being the unofficial leader of the trio. He was the one who decided where traps were set, what formation they took on a mission. Triangular or diamond. He was the one who was strongest in Taijutsu, he was a mathematician, and fighting could be calculated and solved just like arithmetic. Pivot 115 degrees left on the ball of your right foot. Keep your chin parallel with the ground, turn your hand 200 degrees when pulling your fist back to your side. Enemy X has 8 possible paths of offense and 3 defense, also a 6% chance of retreat, 20% if KI is used. If the enemy is a Suna shinobi, there is a 63% chance of Futen, 27% of Doten, chances of lighting and water release jutsu non-existent, enemy uses wind, use fire. Enemy uses earth, use lighting. I don't know any fire or lightning jutsu, retreat, run, 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 don't scream. Shinobi Handbook Rule number 25. A good shinobi never shows his or her emotions. Oh god, pretend you can't feel it, don't scream, don't scream. Uden buried his face in his hands, struggling against the need to sob. What to do? What was he supposed to do? What could he do? Hey look. It's Uden the robot. Why don't you smile for us, robot boy? Robots don't eat, right? So you won't be needing this lunch money. You're too smart. Nobody's that smart. Another 100% on your test. Mom is so proud of you, Uden-chan. It's okay, he's a robot boy, so it's not like he can feel anything anyway. Hey. Leave him alone. You're supposed to be really smart, right? Can you help me study? I really stink at math and I'll be grounded for sure if I get another D. Leave my friend alone or I'll beat you all up. What? Of course we're friends, Uden-kun. What did you think we were? Uden-kun. You came. Uden-kun. This is Megii-chan. She's cool, she's going to sit with us at lunch from now on. Uden-kun. Uden-kun. He jumped to his feet, startling his teammate, tears furiously rolling down his cheeks. Uden-kun. Megii murmured, kneading the ache in her chest with her thumb. We have to go back and help Kohamaru-kun. He told her firmly. She looked up at him with doleful eyes. Uden-kun, what can we do? Kohamaru is stronger than you and me, and he wanted us to be safe. What could we possibly? Something. He cried out, bursting. We can do something. I don't know what, but I can't let him put himself in danger like that when we're out here running around like a couple of headless chickens. He wiped at his tears and dribbling nose. He's my best friend. My best friend. And when I die, I don't want to be old or poisoned or anything like that. I want to go down protecting my best friend's back. Megii watched in relative silence as his body shook with emotion. Slowly, her muscles screaming, she got up and embraced him, burying her nose in the crook of his neck. You're right, Uden-kun, she said, Kohamaru-kun and you guys are my best friends. I'd do anything for you guys. We can't leave Kohamaru-kun behind, and I'll be damned if I let him leave us in the dust either. The two broke apart, wiping their eyes clear. Finally, they lowered their hands and exchanged determined gazes. Uden nodded resolutely. Megii retied her hideate more securely to her forehead. From here on out. We're no longer children. No more childish pranks. He reached out to streak her cheeks with the mud stuck to his fingers. She reached back and did the same to him. Or whining about missions that stink. No more fairy tales. We're shinobi. Kankuro was beginning to get seriously frustrated. Not only had the pipe fox not yet tracked Temari down, but now some overly dramatic-haired rookie had run up from behind and starting yelling all sorts of stupid challenges. Kankuro hated rookies, they were all too beepy, all thought that they were indestructible, and that being a ninja was equal to playing hero. They all reminded Kankuro of himself. Kankuro growled at the raven-haired boy. Get lost. I don't have time to deal with a punk kid like you, I've got more important things to take care of than playing ninja with a stupid Uchiha brat, John. The younger male snarled. It's Uchiha. No one cares, loser. Ha ha ha. The rookie began flying through hand seals, looking hilariously offended, and Kankuro swiftly brought out Karasu, recognizing the sequence for the Kanton technique the boy once used in the preliminaries. The Kutajitsu murmured something in his ear, words he couldn't understand, some weird fox language. And slithered away. Good riddance, he didn't need to risk his hide protecting some demon's pet. The Konoha completed his hand seals, spitting out an enormous sphere of fire. However, the fireball did not barrel toward the puppet wielder as expected, instead, it exploded like a firework, tendrils of flame running rampant through the air. The Konoha Genin's eyes widened and he wasted no time jumping out of the fire's out-of-control path until it burned itself away. The hell? His eyes darted around, Sharingan eyes blazing, the air, it's full of chakra. This whole damn forest is a powder keg. He was at a loss, almost his entire arsenal of jutsu was now hazardous to his own well-being. Kankuro's laughter echoed through the trees. Is breathing fire like some wannabe dragon the only thing you can do? And it looks like you don't even know the elements of your own country, John. Pathetic. You can't use those kind of cheap party tricks in here. It's not called the demon forest for nothing, you know. It's conditioned for the demon prince's use and his use only. Bullshit. Complete and utter bullshit, but the Uchiha didn't know that, and it was more than likely true anyway. In reality, Kankuro had been sure that he was about to become ninja Yaki when he saw that fireball fly out of the Uchiha brat's mouth. However, this could easily be used to ensure the fight was in his favor. The black-haired genin was now hesitant to use any of his jutsu, but Kankuro had no such qualms. All he needed to fight with were his chakra strings, and whatever wild chakra was floating about wasn't hindering that ability in the least. Kankuro grinned. Karasu's mouth clicked open, unleashing a heavy spray of poison gas. The effect was immediate, and the Uchiha was forced to abandon his hiding place in order to avoid inhaling any of the fumes. Kankuro was prepared for him, peppering the black-haired teen with senbon, many of which were deflected harmlessly with a kunai. The boy still had his dojutsu active, but it was useless. The only opponent he could see was the Tsunashiobi's wooden puppet, and the chakra-hazed air hid the marionette strings. The puppet had no muscles, no circulatory system, its movements could not be predicted. PCH, Uchiha huffed. You should just leave, Kankuro's echoing voice spoke again, I have the upper hand and you're next to useless. Go back to your village or you'll end up being the worm my crow eats for lunch, John. The Uchiha's face reddened with anger, his grip on the blade tightening. Enraged, he charged at Karasu, throwing shuriken and fists that bounced ineffectively off the puppet's wooden frame. Karasu lunged, its arms, too many joints, it's not natural, it's not human, keep it away, curling around to grasp at the younger male's thrashing body. The black-haired boy sent Karasu's eyes rolling with a sharp uppercut and the head rolled off the body easily. From his hiding place, Kankuro scoffed at the Uchiha triumphant expression. Did the kid really think that beheading his puppet made any difference? It wasn't a human that would fall dead once its spine was severed. He watched with glee as he unfurled the head's hidden dagger and sent it flying toward the enemy shinobi's skull, snickering at the genin's bewildered face. For a moment, he thought the teen's eyes squinched shut in horror, but a mind-numbing jolt of electricity burst from the Konoha nin's body, causing Kankuro's aim to miss as static jumped up the chakra strings to bite at his fingers. He swore, releasing the jutsu for a split moment. It was moment enough for the Uchiha heir to slip free, shaking somewhat as he was zapped by his own technique. Karasu jumped back into action a moment later somewhat stiffly, one arm popping open to relay senbon. But Kankuro found that there was a problem. No senbon were coming out. He ground his teeth together, pulling the string harder. The mechanism clicked desperately, but no weapons emerged. Damn it. The little bastard must have partially melted the mechanisms. It's jammed. You're going to pay for that, you little circus freak. For once, the local shinobi hurled an insult back. You're calling me a circus freak with a clown face like that? He did not just insult my face paint. Kankuro thought. That ignorant little pest. It was almost worse than being accused of wearing makeup like a girl. Face paint was the mark of a puppeteer, and as the eldest son of the Kazekage, he was one of few who could wear purple representing nobility and loftiness. The fan brat might as well have just spat on his teachers' graves. Karasu lunged, its arms flinging wildly. You know, I was going to just beat the snot out of you, but now I think I'll go ahead and kill your sorry ass, John. The black-haired teen dodged, but one of Karasu's arms snapped into action, catching the human by the ankle and throwing him into the trunk of the tree he had been crouched on. The boy clutched at his nose, blood seeping out from between his fingers as Karasu's peeled him off the bark, this time throwing his back against a particularly thick branch. How about death by massive head trauma? That sounds fun. The puppet's mouth clicked with a soundless mock of laughter. Or, at least it did until the teen's heel jammed into its body. The boneless puppet arsed upward, pushed higher as the Uchiha kicked it repeatedly, his motions almost equivalent to the shadow of the dancing leaf. Shishirenden. He called out, appearing above the wooden marionette. However, he found his foot collided, not with wood, but a fleshy palm. His eyes widened in shock, and Kankuro grinned up at him. Power me, John. The Chuunin exclaimed, driving his fist into the other male's pelvis. The Uchiha kicked back in retaliation, but his blow only met wood. Damn it. How can I be losing here? Because you're too stupid to know when the odds are against you? Kankuro supplied. Shut up. Anger was such a useful tool. I'd like to see you try to make me, fanboy. Gladly. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video guys, let me know in the comments section how was the story and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video, bye bye.